in my garden.
Katie, this is so lush and beautiful.
Thank you. It was a construction site just 2 years ago, and we pushed a big pile next to the house that came out of the hole, and then we had all the leftover stuff formed into, actually just into this long skinny bed. And we piled up a number of things that are involved in sheet mulching. Even though we didn't cover grass, we used the old cardboard from the appliance boxes and the layers of compost and built up. And we also used the old dirt that was just the gravel from the pad that was here before and the old stuff that was dug out of the hole. And then we enriched it with compost and shaped these beds. This one was added later. It's really just compost and straw and cardboard piled up and left. There are a lot of bulbs. It's just a big daffodil show right now, which is good. And then later in the year, I try and plant things, with the exception of the daffodils, that are pollinator attractors. That's what the ribes is for. The flowering currant is a big favorite of hummingbirds, and so it's protected from the deer. This wallflower is a totally stalwart plant. It blooms all year long. It never did stop blooming. Then it cut it back a little, and it's covered with bees and all sorts of insects all summer long. When the daffodils go by, I almost always plant seeds for poppies or something else showy and easy that are not deer attractors. Tried to separate the things that the deer don't like out here and then protect them in the little courtyard things that are more delicate.
And it looks like your beds are lined with just found.
It's all found stuff. We really didn't bring in, we brought in compost, but we didn't bring in anything. And we used old broken concrete to make the sort of patio space. This was the fence that was out front, and it was falling down the boards. We used the boards for something too, but these were the
posts?
uprights. They were they were sort of in a stack, and then they just became part of the whole.
And this is an elderberry?
It's sambucus. Yes, it is an elderberry. It's the dark one, and it too gets really eaten by the deer. So that's what those little bundles of dog hair in the little net things. They've kind of worked. I mean, I should have put more, because where they are, the deer haven't eaten them.
Oh, I've got to try that.
The west wind swoops right through here. So I've learned the things that can't tolerate it. The rosemary and lavender are really happy, and I'm very indulgent with foxglove because I love them, and then I sort of deadhead them before they spew seeds about. And I've left this spot to put cosmos, and used some old dirt from somewhere that was not enriched. So it's definitely still spring here, but it was a thrill that first year we had straw stacked up for so long. My husband that first spring said, is it always going to be straw? But by that summer you could push it apart and begin to plant the perennials. So that was pretty thrilling to have the soil made over the winter.
So this is very inspiring because it's only about 2 years old.
This will be its third summer. And the first one was totally building it. There's a lens of water that sort of comes from the house that I really would try to capture. So my goal here is to make new beds. This one is totally straw and a layer of compost, and last year I put all the cuttings out of the garden, just threw them there, and it's called sheet mulching in place. There's a layer of cardboard down to begin with, but the hope will be that I can plant it with really deer resistant things like more evergreen huckleberry, lots more lavender, things that can fill this in and soak up the water that runs this way.
So the cardboard is to keep weeds?
It does do that. It also it's a more elegant word than rot. It breaks down in the same way that it brings carbon to to the construction the same way the straw does, but it does form that impenetrable. So you can do it on top of grass if you layer the cardboard so that it overlaps by about 6 inches.
So we're kind of building a compost in place.
It's exactly what it is.
And then using it as a garden bed.
Yes, I mean you have to sort of be able to put up with looking at straw and dirt, but if you didn't want to, you could cover it much more tidily with a layer of compost and then push aside places right away, not even waiting for it to break down, and put a little bit of potting soil in and plant. I've seen that done really nicely. So it isn't like you have to look at this for months unless you don't mind, or you're willing to just let the whole process take over. You also is a good opportunity for growing a cover crop, which I may do, but I might use poppies instead of clover, but something that you seed on the top and then cut it down before it goes to seed. That's a really common use of. I wanted to show you this bed, which is shaped like a U, to be a sun trap so that you have more edges, because one of the permaculture principles that's sort of interesting, it's actually, I think it's from ecology in general, is that the edges are where things happen, like at the edge where the grass meets the forest, where the gravel meets the bed. But then you get more space, you can reach it more easily too, but that's why it has this particular shape. This bed was built, it was small when we first divided it into 4. I sort of like those old formal gardens, the 4-square gardens, but mine isn't very square, but it has that same sort of thinking. And then I enlarged this one, which was another just stack up of the same elements. And it too captures some of that water that runs off. So I tried to put plants at that end that like water, because it gets wet down there. Things run this way. I, from the beginning, have wanted more vegetables than I really have, but I've tried to mix them in so that they become a decorative garden too. I mean, haven't got a lot of sun here, but enough that all the good things that go all like kale and I've left the kale go to seed because, as you can see, it's good for the early pollinators when there isn't much else yet around for them. But I'll try and keep an eye on it before it goes to seed. But that's why it's sprouting. Not a very fussy garden.
And there are a lot of herbs in here as well.
That's exactly what they're. You know, one of my favorite permaculture principles. They're the most wonderful, good living sorts of rules, really, about how to make your life just better. It's as much about people and the way we live as it is just plants, and it's by no means impossibly scientific. In the book that I love so much, it's called Gaia's Garden by Toby Hemingway, he talks about if your herb garden is so far that you get your slippers wet when you go to get the herbs for the scrambled eggs, then it's too far from the house. So that was my thinking there. Yes, and I'd like more herbs, and I have another important thing with permaculture is to try and have vegetables that go all year long. So I have these 2 kinds of sorrel, which we use a lot. This one in particular has a really. Do you know that one? It's a peppery sort of. It's different. And then the more conventional French sorrel is there. And I put the evergreen huckleberry there because they are just the world's most wonderful plant. They could be out. The deer don't eat them, but bees love them, and I like to watch the insects come for sure. I have a lot of frogs. It's a great pleasure is to have so many frogs. Permaculture it's such an awkward word, really, that it's never seemed very inspiring to me, and for some reason when I hear it I'm always afraid the garden won't be beautiful. But permaculture gardens have been the most amazing gardens because they're so interesting. They sort of satisfy and make a home for all kinds of different creatures. And we don't have many birds in this little section because of the cat lives here. But other than that, there are frogs and bugs and all sorts of things. And then people, you know, that food and beautiful plants. And
it's so lush and yet so new. I think it's very inspiring to people to realize that permaculture isn't this strange technique that's beyond there. You've shown us that it's really sort of an easier way of going about it when you think about it.
Oh, without a doubt. It is far easier because it's really, the most important thing is to make good dirt, which any good gardener will tell you that. But somehow good dirt meant just hauling in a little topsoil, but permaculture allows you to make these big deep beds, and suddenly a lot of your problems are gone. They hold a lot more moisture. There's room for lots of soil activity from the microbes that make it good soil, and you just you know, I've let the beach strawberry, which is a native plant, pretty much have its way underneath these trees because it doesn't compete with them very much. They have little shallow roots, and yet, I mean, I always kind of hope they'll actually have strawberries, but they don't. They're just, but they're ground cover. They're easy to pull out, and I don't have bare soil that has room for weed seeds to germinate. And I've also planted, the bulbs are really good for our Mediterranean climate. These are species tulips, the little tartas, and then this one doesn't seem like a species tulip, but I don't remember planting anything else. But there's such a quick hit of color when you need it, and then they go dormant and disappear pretty much in the summer. I put soaker hoses in all these beds, but I've never really used them. I water if it gets, you know, we get those 3 days of really warm weather. It can get pretty hot right here, and I'll water by hand a little bit. But a design flaw was there's no water spigot in this space, so that cuts it down too. Another big influence on me was Anne Lovejoy's book, the design, organic garden design book, and she talks about these are Nepeta dropmore, and they are ever blooming all summer, and they don't seem to, I don't have any little seedlings, but they have wonderful blue flowers that are just awash with bees. And then black-eyed Susans. So it's sturdy plants that are beautiful and cheerful, but they don't use a lot of water, either one of them. For the summer, I really like to do sweet peas. That I use the little stubby knee-high ones that sort of spill over this wall, along with nasturtium. They come out and cover up a lot of the gravel. I have edible peas in the trellis out front and some climbing sweet peas out there. This little bed doesn't look like much right now, but it was mostly because, as you can see, it's really wet here, and I wanted to soak up, I wanted to grow things that would send their roots down. I also really wanted a hop vine. And in the summer last year, this hop vine started from this and went all up the side. It was really wonderful. So we built this bed out of it. Was the same pile of straw. This one was really casually done. And when you use the straw, you can pull off what's called a book, just a big chunk of straw. You don't have to fluff it and spread it. You can lay it down in books so that it's pretty sturdy and heavy and won't blow away. But I was excited to see that this is 1 year. We did it last year. And then it got nasturtium seeds in it somehow, and so last summer it was just covered with, you can see how.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's nice soil, yeah, and it smells really good, and there was no work. This is a pretty interesting permaculture plant. It's called a mashua vine. I can show you some of the tubers in there. It's actually edible. They're related to nasturtiums, Tropolium.
Yes. They're the little yellow flowers?
They have little orange flowers that the hummingbirds love. Little trumpet, is that what you call that? That shape, the nectar pool in. Yeah. And this hellebore got moved because there was just no room. But that would be my goal, really, is to put the things that the deer don't bother out here in a more lovely situation. It was just, but it's in process. But it grew from there and a few from here and just covered the deer fence, and it makes things sort of like potatoes that you can roast.
So Katie, even your downspout is watering your bed.
That's the theory, and I think hopefully it does, because it's not a very deep one, and I rarely water it. We did put what's called a swale out in front of the other bed, where we dug a hole and put straw down in it so that it would stop the water that ran off of the house, and then let it gradually perk out to that bed out there. So
neat.
Thank you.
It's such a beautiful place. And you've even
Thank
recycled an old stove.
Our son came to visit for one weekend, and he helped me build this bed, and he said at the end of the day, "So is there anything else, Mom?" And I said, "Oh yeah, sweetie, there's that Franklin stove over there behind the other little house." And I was just kidding, but it nearly killed us all, but he got it up here. And we used to have one of these, so it feels friendly in this little living room space, but in truth we more often use the sun umbrella, which is put away for the winter. But
thank you so much, Katie. This has been such a wonderful visit.
You're so welcome. It's been fun to show how easily you can really have beds that will support so many plants.